Anyways, we're happy to have a guest on the show. Welcome to the NerdBrand Podcast, everybody. I'm Jason. That's Mitch. That's John. And this is Andy Strote. Did I say that correctly?
Yes. Yep. Exactly right.
So today's episode is I'm not here to steal your lunch money, which,
Exactly.
we thank Andy for that one.
Yep.
So Andy is a successful agency founder and author, and has a new book titled "How to Start a Successful Creative Agency." He writes about communication, freelancing, and the inner workings of starting an agency. So you've got some fascinating stories, and today we're going to
hmm
focus on like what is a professional client. But first,
hmm
I want you to take some time, sir, to introduce yourself, talk a little bit about who you are, and share with
Sure.
everyone all of those things.
Yeah. So my name is Andy Strote. I started as a copywriter, working in agencies, then became a creative director. I worked from my home freelance for 6 years, writing for a variety of clients. I got really busy and decided the only way I could grow from there is to form an agency. I founded my first agency with a partner, so the two of us. 5 years later, there were 30 of us, and we were on the radar of two companies to be acquired, and we sold that company to an IT company out of Montreal. 6 months later, I was out of there and free to do whatever I wanted, which, silly enough, I started a second agency. Once again with a partner, this time a different one. And we grew that to 28 people. That agency is still around. I retired from it to go traveling and do a bunch of things, photography and so on, and then to write this book. So that's my background is writing and then running agencies, which seem to grow to 28 to 30 people, seem to be the right size for us. Um, and so that's the last agency I retired from. And as I said, they're still up and running. They're still very successful. My partners are still running it.
Go ahead, Mitch.
No, no, I just so you hit on one of the keys to a successful agency is having the right chemistry and having all the right parts in all the right places, having complementary skill sets together.
Mm-hmm.
From the client side,
Yeah.
in your experience, what have you seen as being the key as far as cultivating clients? What's for an agency starting out?
Mm-hmm.
What should be their goal in that regard?
Okay. So you'd mentioned earlier, we were talking about professional clients and not stealing lunch money.
Yes.
So when you're starting out, whether you're an independent freelancer or whether you've come together and you've formed a small agency, it obviously depends where you're coming from and what clients you've already got. So my recommendation is when you're starting out, you're probably going to do just about anything because you need the money and you need to get your business up and running. And you need to also figure out things for yourself. There's nothing like doing it to realize, yeah, this is what we want to do, or no, we don't want to do that. Right. And so at the beginning, you might have an idea of the kinds of clients that you want, and what kind of work you're best at and you enjoy doing. But you don't know. I mean, obviously also depends where you live, what environment you're in, who your potential clients are around you if you're dealing with, sort of a local market. But then after a while, you kind of want to sort that out. You start to realize, you know what, maybe we're not the guys to do the high fashion stuff because we're kind of not like that. We're probably more the guys to do, either regular e-commerce kind of things, or we're working for bigger clients, bigger corporations, banks, insurance companies, governments, whatever. For me, once you sort of get rolling, I want to deal with professional clients. And so you say, well, what's a professional client? A number of things. First of all, it's a client who's in charge of their marketing and communications, or whatever it is that you're doing. You want to deal with somebody whose main job it is to deal with people like you and to turn out the projects that you turn out for them. So they understand first of all, they understand what they're asking for. They understand what you're doing. They understand how you get to a solution, the steps you have to go through, the approval levels, and so on. So they're professional marketers, communicators, whatever. To me, they're the other side of the coin. You're one side of the coin. They're the other side of the same coin. Together, you're going to do these projects. They're on the client side. You're on the delivery side, and you're going to work together. The second thing is they have dedicated budgets to do what they're doing, what they need to do, right? They're not shy about talking about budgets. They probably work in a department that gets maybe an annual budget. And at the beginning of the year, they look at it and they say, oh, this year we're going to have to do these projects, these 15, 20 projects, whatever they might be, right? And they try to figure out how to allocate those budgets and how are we going to get this done. And then they figure out who they're going to work with to actually do these things. And so talking to them about money is fairly easy in a sense, because they have a budget, they need to spend it, they need to get these jobs done, they need to pay somebody to do it, right? And so that to me is one of the big differentiators between professional clients and the other clients. And we'll stay with professional clients for now. So, when you go in to see somebody about a project, one of two things can happen as far as money is concerned. Either they tell you, first of all, they give you a briefing of the project. Here's what we want to do. So they might tell you, and for this project, we have a budget. We have $25,000. Could you come back with an estimate and break down how you would do this and let us know whether we can do this for $25,000 and how you would allocate that budget, right? And so that's fair, right? The other approach is they don't tell you how much. They might not have even figured it out. They'll just say, here's what we need to do. Come back to us with a proposal, with a budget. And it's rarely a question of, well, if the budget's higher than we sort of thought, we're not going to do it. It might be, well, we need to relook at what the project is to make it fit. But they just want you to tell them how much. And it's a fairly easy discussion. The number may not be what they were hoping for, but then you can talk to them and say, okay, either come up with a greater budget or let's relook at this project and make it fit whatever budget you have. Scale it, right? So my point is, budget discussions aren't difficult. They're not awkward. I mean, there's lots of times there's give and take, but it's just money. And the point is it's corporate money. They have this money to spend. Whether they want to spend it all on this project or not, well, that's a different discussion, right? So just the difference between somebody like that and a non-professional client, shall we say, is it's probably personal money for them. So it might be a smaller business, and it's not. They don't have money budgeted. They always want to know, well, how much it's going to cost, and then they have to figure out how they're going to pay for it. And they often want to talk about money way too early. They haven't even defined the project properly.
Exactly.
Right. Their big thing is how much it's going to cost, and you're asking yourself, how much is what going to cost? We haven't figured out what it is. In appropriate detail. I mean, they might say, oh, we need a website. Oh, okay, great. What does that website do? How are you going to use it? How does it integrate? Can you subscribe to things, et cetera, et cetera? What are the features? That's what you need to do first, right? And that's another difference between professional and non-professional clients. Professional client knows they have to give you a brief, right, of some sorts. They have to come and tell you what they want. Otherwise, how are you going to possibly create an estimate and then finally do the project? Whereas a non-professional client, often, because they don't do marketing all the time and it's not something they might be comfortable with, they typically say, why don't you come in for a meeting and we'll talk about it? So you arrive there and they have nothing. They literally, that's what they want to do. They want to talk about it. So to use, that awful phrase, pick your brains, right? And then you tell me how much this is going to cost. It's tough because for them, the answer is they would really, it rather didn't cost anything or very close to nothing. And probably in many cases really wish they didn't have to do the project. That's the other thing, right? They come to you and they do this because they're out of desperation sometimes, right? Their sales aren't what they had expected, or for some reason they sort of have to do this project, and they just want to get it over with and spend as little as possible. The problem from our perspective is then you're always having to justify what you're doing, right? And I would just rather not do that, or they won't have a budget. Right. I mean, literally, they don't have a budget. So you ask them, you sit there and you talk and you ask them, well, what budget did you have allocated for this? And they'll say, well, we don't have a budget allocated to it. You tell us how much it's going to cost. And in a sense, and then we'll decide whether or not we're going to do this.
See, and then it becomes about the cost. It doesn't become about the goal or the objective.
No, it doesn't. They spend very little time at that point what the benefit might be, right? So if the goal was, well, we have to increase sales, and you're talking about some kind of a project that ostensibly could help them increase sales, they get hung up on how much it's going to cost to get there. You can start having cost benefit discussions, but often they're not even really prepared to do that either, right? Mm-hmm. You could say, well, invest a penny and get a dime. Right. But
yeah,
that's sometimes hard too. And it's just a difficult way to deal with the client.
Yeah. It costs a lot of money on the agency side too, for us to sit there for a couple of weeks to try to figure out what exactly are you asking for us to do based on the conversations we've had. And then we spend 2 weeks doing, some sort of proposal. You can't figure it out. Yeah. So
you can't do that. You can't do that. You're losing money. You just can't do it. It's the wrong client. Like these are not serious clients. And the other thing that is often goes hand in hand is it's a one-off project, right? I mean, if they did this kind of project more often, they would behave in a more professional manner. But because it's kind of a one-off project, it's either the company owner or somebody who works there who, in theory, is the marketing person, is probably the sales guy. Right. But they have no experience doing this. And frankly, when the job is over, that's it. There's no more marketing to be done. So you've spent all of your time getting to know these people, getting to know what it is they want, all for one project.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. That's I'm sorry. Go ahead, John.
I was just going to say, kind of going back to you spend the 2 weeks talking to these people, prepping an SOW and all that good stuff. And when you're in like a physical goods space, if you're running an e-commerce, brand or business, you're looking very heavily at, cost of goods sold, your customer acquisition costs. Like those are very definite things that you're looking at. I think a lot of people, especially in the agency world, they're focused on the work. They're focused on getting the next thing to keep the bank account rolling. And they're not thinking about the fact that they just invested a bunch of money into that customer acquisition costs, or, in that sense, it's cost of goods sold. I mean, you may get the deal, but you spent so much more time and energy,
But it's like there's a certain level of client that, by no fault of their own, they don't see marketing as a continuum.
Right.
I have to get this. It's task based. I have to get this thing done today. Then I will move on to something else. Mm-hmm. When advertising, marketing your product, your service, it's a continuous, it's a river that flows constantly. It's not something you turn the faucet on and then turn it off. It has to be a living mechanism. And I think, to your point, Andy, I think that's part of the problem when dealing with a certain type of client is the inability. In as much as they know they need cash flow, they know they need business, they know that's a continuum. What they don't understand is the fact that marketing and advertising, et cetera, is parallel to that.
Dependent upon it. It's dependent upon it. I mean, if you stop the marketing, you stop the advertising, like when businesses are struggling with cash flow, and it happens to agencies as well. I mean, if you don't do it yourself, well, You've turned off the faucet yourself. You're dealing with a faucet that's not running at the moment. And you're like, why is it not running? Well, you turned it off because you stopped doing marketing. You stopped doing advertising. You stopped getting out there and talking to people.
You disappeared.
You disappeared. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But you see, and so in our case, and I don't know, maybe it's because, my background working at bigger agencies, even when I was working freelance writing before I formed my first agency, I was working for big clients, big corporations, banks, public utilities, government. I just got in there and got those kind of clients. When we had our agency, we did have some smaller clients, but these were clients that took marketing seriously. So, I might sound like I'm biased, towards large clients versus small clients. It is obviously my preference, but I want a small client to behave like a big client. And we had that. We got that. We had a client, his whole company was 5 people, maybe. 3 of them were salespeople out on the road, a couple of people back in the office. That was it, right? But he was a professional marketer. And we would sit to have a meeting to go over our annual plan. That's a small company, right? And we would spend 5 or 6 hours together in a boardroom, and we would charge for that. We would come back with a document going through and helping him break down the budget. Here are the things that we talked about. Here's what these things are going to cost, more or less ballpark, right? So your annual budget should be, $250,000, for example. Okay. And here's how it's going to be broken down, right? And so in his mind, he's looking at, okay, an annual budget, $250,000. If I'm spending, say, somewhere between 7 and 10% of my sales on that, so that means I'm looking at sales of $2.5 million, $3 million and stuff. Yeah, I'm doing sales of $5 million, so you're way below 10%. So great, yeah, $250,000, that's reasonable. I can do that, right? We did everything for the guy, including websites, email, got into social media, print pieces, redecorated his trucks, the whole deal, right? And we took that all into account. So we would use these working sessions to work with him as a small company to figure all these things out, because he's not a big company. He doesn't have people internally do that. He counted on us to help him do that. And so those are the kinds of small clients I've got all kinds of time for, because it was very straightforward dealing with him. It was fun. We had a good time. We did things, competitive analysis. We looked at all of his competitors. We got all of the competitors' materials. We did screen grabs of all their websites, all their promotions, everything. And we laid it all out. We looked at it and said, okay, here's kind of where you fit into this. Here's who you're up against, and here's what they're all doing. A lot of clients, they don't have time to do that. They never raise their head high enough to look at it and say, gee, what are my competitors actually doing? What's going on out there?
That's great.
No,
that's so
right?
great.
Yeah,
right? Because they're so busy. They're so busy on their own stuff. Who's got time to do that?
Yeah.
Right. Well, we do. Right. And so, and again, we would charge them for it. We would do a whole competitive analysis and say, okay, here's what they're doing. And we would make phone calls and get information and pull things together. So you had a pretty serious report on what was going on in this guy's industry, at that time, what his competitors are doing. We would look at what foreign companies are doing, what similar company in Europe, what are they doing? Let's look at that. Yeah. No problem.
You kind of hit on something, Andy. I think it's interesting, and it's kind of it's a very basic principle, but basically a client is paying us to do the things they can't do.
Yeah.
And it seems like sometimes, again, talking about the less than professional client, is they don't recognize there's things they're trying to do themselves that they simply can't. To your point, they're down here looking at this. They're not looking
right
at the larger world.
It goes to what I hear a lot out there in the field is that it's working, versus working on your business versus in your business. That's what everybody's saying right now. Yeah. I've heard that this week, probably because my job has been lately business dev and going out to networking events, things like that, shaking hands, greeting people, whatever. try not to get like, that one guy in the corner that nobody wants to talk to and get stuck there for 15, 20 minutes. The networking event's only an hour. I'm the guy.
Yeah.
I'm the guy that's trying to like navigate around all that right now in the
Yeah.
business.
Yeah.
So but I say all that because I mean that's the type that, like what Mitch is saying, is like they're working in it, not on it, and they don't realize the difference. They don't realize that that's what they're doing. You mentioned earlier about when you started printing out, like you really got my attention when you said you printed out competitor websites. You took screen grabs of all all the competitor websites to stack up where they are. I love that. That's the one thing I miss, and it happened because of COVID. Mitch is a guy in a room that he wants a whiteboard and blah, things just happen and come out. I'm the guy that I will put up on the wall. I tape up, and Mitch has seen this. I'll print out 11 by 17 color sheets of web pages for one website and tape it up on the wall and make everybody look at it and go like, why, when you go from this page to that page, why does that not make sense? Because I worked at a place that we had 44 web pages, but everybody thought there was only 20. And I brought in those sheets after printing them out, and they were like, how did you do that? And I'm like, it's a printer.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Where do the other 20 pages come from? It's like, you did them.
Exactly. Right. And that's where, again, if you're looking at competitors and different promotions they're running, and even within corporations, there's stuff there where they might be talking to different types of audiences. They might be talking even to sort of internal audiences or more business to business as opposed to business to consumer. It's amazing the stuff you find. We would go find the people in those companies and look up their LinkedIn pages. We would see what these companies were doing on LinkedIn, right? Why not? Right. I know this guy's a competitor. All I got to do is put in the name of the company in LinkedIn. It tells me all the people who work there. Right. I'm going to find the president, the vice president, the director of sales, the marketing guy. I'm going to go look at their profile, see what they say, because some of these people could be very active on LinkedIn. Maybe that's what our client should be doing. How would I know if I didn't look? Right.
It goes back to our core principle, guys.
Yeah.
Everything's an ad.
Everything's an ad.
Yeah. It absolutely. Right. So, again, when you're talking to a professional client, like what I've just talked about, putting together this kind of a document, like they have time for that. They want to do that. Right. They really want to do that. And it's sort of just for their own internal, for their own use. It's not something that's going out there. But if you don't have a survey of your marketplace and an understanding how you fit and what everybody else is doing, then you're kind of flying blind a little bit. And so that's kind of client I liked if it was a small client. But frankly, most of our clients were larger clients, and we were lucky, I guess. Maybe we just started that way and we kept going that way.
Let me ask you this, Andy. I know that some agencies and some people in the business subscribe to the idea that you need to always be pitching. That whether there's a hunger or thirst for business or not, you need to always be pitching because it keeps you sharp. In that regard, do you feel the same way?
Yeah. I don't want to make it seem like we were never pitching. We were. Absolutely. But maybe on a higher level than many others would have. We always had something on the go. But, I sense that from others, like this takes up a whole lot of their time. It took up some of our time. But, and so the other thing that we did, and I've talked to people online and they don't want to do this at all, is to answer RFPs, right? So answering an RFP is a lot of work.
Oh boy.
Okay. It's a lot of work.
That's the truth.
Yeah.
And you don't always know what you're getting on the other side either, really.
Well, so we got good at it. And we would be really, really picky about which ones we answered. And that's where I think people kind of blow their brains out a little bit answering RFPs, where they don't stand a chance in hell. Like you're wasting your time. There's no sense answering that RFP, right? And so we had number of criteria for that. I mean, first off, for some RFPs, they come and ask you to respond to it. So they've already picked you to say, would you answer our RFP? And then we'd say, okay, let us have a look at it and we'll let you know. And they want to know yes or no. Are you going to respond to this? So they've already qualified you, right? As opposed to an open RFP. And there's all kinds of websites you can go look at. And here's all the open RFPs from all the companies and governments and organizations and so on. But you have no relationship, you have no idea. And the challenge with RFPs is that a lot of organizations and companies, they're bound, they have to work that way. They have their internal laws in a sense. They're forced to issue RFPs for things, but they already have a preferred supplier. They already know, right?
Yeah,
they already know. Yeah, it's a formality. They have to go through it, and it's a formality. So you don't want to answer that,
even if they have the budget. Even if they have 20,000, but you feel like they're questionably going to be a professional client. That's got to be factored into the 20,000 as well.
Sure. Well, the first thing you do is ask for a $10,000 deposit and see how it goes. No, seriously, right? Yeah. So if you're doing business with somebody like that for the first time, so that's the other thing. If you're doing business with, a smaller company like that, and you're still feeling each other out, you have to have this discussion straight up, right? You say, here's how we work, right? Starts with a deposit, a 50% deposit, and then we get to all these deliverables, and then, at a certain deliverable, we're going to need another payment. And you want your last payment before you deliver the last bit of the project, right?
If you're chasing money, nobody's doing the work and nobody's happy. No. Nobody's seeing results, and it's just a complete mess. That's the boulder in the way.
For us, typically, if we were doing a design job, whatever it was, right? Whether it's a print job or a web job or something, whenever there was design involved, right? And there was no sort of clear precedent for what we were doing. Our standard offer was, we're going to do 3 concepts, right? 3 design concepts. And any one of them has to answer all the requirements of the project. So no
objective criteria.
Yeah, they all have to be viable concepts. So, in theory, you can pick any one of these 3 and we're delighted. We're happy if you choose them, right? So a not so professional client might say, oh, and they're trying to get the budget down, because we charge for 3 concepts, right? Oh, just show me one, right? It never works. I mean, rarely. Oh, next thing, I really like that, but don't you have anything else? Well, you only asked for one, right? So here's the one.
Interesting.
Well, I think we dived into what a professional client looks like. I mean, anybody out there listening or watching, I mean, it's, this kind of gives you a little bit of behind the scenes of agencies, but also I think it does in some fashion and way apply to just business. Customers are customers, and we're not bashing any customers. I mean, we're consumers ourselves. We want what we want for the price that we want for the thing that we want. And, I want a Corvette. I can't afford one.
Yeah.
But you know what? That's okay. I'll drive a Mazda because I have my need fulfilled and it's not too bad. I mean, it's kind of like that. So business strategy is like, no matter what you're in, you got to think about your clients and where they're at and what they're like and what you want to do and target. Otherwise, you're going to waste so much money in other areas that you're not aware that you're wasting them in. And that's why it's like, for us, I do love it when we see somebody come to us and they're like, I got my budget figured out. I know what I need. This is it. Can you do it? Can you help? And then when you brought up the example, Andy, about a range, that's an old sales trick that I've seen, used for a long time just to get people comfortable about talking about money in a room.
Yeah.
So uncomfortable. But when you give them a range, they're like, their mind immediately goes like, I guess that's what I need to budget.
Yeah.
It gets so much out of the way with the money, and after you do the strategy and you start looking at things like that, it's so much better.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, see, that's where in a professional clients, and this is where the steal your lunch money bit comes in. Professional clients, they're just managing budgets. It's not their money, right? They come to work every day. They're a marketing or communications person. They have these projects to do. They've been given this kind of a budget, and they need to spend it, right? And it's just part of work. And frankly, some of them are very grateful if you're doing the work for them, because there's just one more project that somebody's taking care of for them. Well, I've had a few people tell me when one of my friends is sort of ex Price Waterhouse guy. He read my book and he said, because I know you've written this for creative agencies, but this could apply to a lot of small businesses.
Oh yeah.
He said, you should maybe write another version of this book, not talk so much about agencies anymore, just talk about business. I said, okay, there's an idea.
I would agree because some of the stuff, like I'm talking to them all day.
Yeah.
I mean, it's what I do. And it's like, I hear, it's funny how it's just the problems are the same. It's just a different business, but the problems are always the same.
Yeah, pretty much.
Got to run, but I appreciate you being on the show, man. I'm looking forward to us definitely doing it again.
Sure. Anytime.
Okay.
Yep.
Andy,
thanks
you so
guys.
much.
See ya.
Have a great weekend.
All right. Yeah. You too. Have fun.
Yeah.